My name's Tony Ryan. The official title of this talk is Making Science Work for Refugees and Refugees Work for Science. And it could also be hydroponics, synthetic soils to make the desert bloom. So I just want to tell you the story, okay? So I'm 2015, I'm Pro Vice Chancellor for the Faculty of Science. I've just set up the Grantham Centre for Sustainable Futures, and I'm on my way by train, of course, to COP21. And as I'm passing through, there's an exhibit of what's called a Dress for Our Time, which was by my really good friend and collaborator, Helen Story. And it was to use the UNHCR dress as a projection for data about climate change driving mass migration. So I spotted that on the way out. And I get out there and have various things to do in terms of chairing sessions. And this is a session about soil smart agriculture. And you'll hear a lot about this fella, Duncan Cameron, throughout. So he's my soil biology partner in crime. And we had a piece in the Guardian at the time about the loss of soil to agriculture through soil being degraded by intensive monoculture. So it kind of, you know, there was a bit of attention for that. And the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, this is one of their slides. Agriculture uses 70% of the world's freshwater supplies, and it actually also produces 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. So food and agriculture are a big deal in terms of sustainability. Well, we'd had a research program together with people who made green roofs. So this green roof architect had kind of wandered into my lab back in 2002 and said, we're really struggling to retrofit green roofs to buildings because you have to build them so they can bear the load of the substrate. And I just said kind of, you know, off the cuff, well, why don't you use polyurethane foam? It's really light, holds water. And if you ever go to a rubbish dump, you'll see things growing on it. And so it came to pass. I think, Liam, you might have even been involved in the outset of this project. Anyway, and it worked, but it didn't work because we had the wrong partners. But we went back after COP21 to the growth facilities outside the university, and these trays were still there. Now, the polypropylene tray had degraded, but you can see the polyurethane foam inside, and down here are all the roots. And all these plants have been growing on top of it and had become self-sustaining and made their own soil and had just been left untended for 5 years. So that got us into this field of hydroponics. And I'm going to turn all chemistry professor on you now. The word has a Greek root, hydro meaning water and ponos work. And basically in hydroponics, the substrate holds the plants up, the growing media, and the water is essentially a dilute nutrient solution. And so the roots dip into the water and you can grow things. And if you're eating tomatoes, salad, aubergines, courgettes, peppers, at this time of year in the UK, it's highly likely that they were grown hydroponically. So these are hydroponic tomatoes, cherry tomatoes that you might get in any store. And they're being grown in these white bags. And the white bags contain mineral wool. And the nutrient solution is dripped into them through these little tubes. And you can grow all sorts of things. There's all sorts of different ways of doing hydroponics, but basically the same principle applies. You have something to hold the roots up and a supply of nutrient. So it's really, really good in terms of you use far less water than growing things outside. There's very little area for the water to evaporate from. You can get very high crop density and high value crops. But it's hard to set up. The technical knowledge requirements are high. Often it's very capital intensive. And these types of environments are essentially aseptic. So it's almost like going into a clean room. You have to walk over a sticky mat. You have to wear a paper suit, head cover. And so disease can run riot if disease gets in there. And you can't grow base calories. You can't grow taters and rice and things this way. Anyway, we came back and Duncan and I started a PhD student on designing polyurethane foam to replace mineral wool, using the things we knew about polyurethane and how it might work. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to replace these inorganic growing media. So some of you might have little clay balls for growing houseplants in at home. If you are a gardener, you'll get these starter blocks made from mineral wool, or you'll grow things in vermiculite, or you might use steam cleaned coconut coir or wood chips. But rock wool is what's used commercially. And rock wool is literally what it says. It's wool made from rock. So you take rock or industrial metal smelting waste, heat it up, put it in a furnace, spin fibers, collect the fibers, turn them into blocks, and Grodan is the company that dominates this business. So if you go to a garden center, you'll see little starter blocks. But really, the business is in these. And this is all waste from hydroponic greenhouses. In the Benelux countries, there are 60 square kilometers of greenhouse. And there are mineral wool mountains because it's uneconomic to reuse it. So it just piles up. So on the train on the way back, we dreamt up this microcosm farm idea where you make your own rain, okay? Because all agriculture relies on rain. And rain, to use a technical term, is solar desalinated water. So we're going to make our own rain by solar desalinating water. And then we're going to use the brine to actually provide some cooling in the greenhouse, because often in hot environments, the greenhouse is too hot, okay? And we're going to have polyurethane foam, grow plants. We can even shade from the sun and collect energy if it's on a brownfield site or adjacent to an industrial facility, pump extra carbon dioxide in to improve yields. And even kind of haven't got to this stage yet of having pollinators and predators in the greenhouse, but all those things are possible. And then at the end of the process, take the polyurethane foam and put it in a bioreactor along with the agricultural waste to make fertilizer and generate methane. And we've demonstrated now all of these technologies. And it happens. I mean, it works. So this is Sundrop Farms. So it opened in 2016. In Australia, it produces 15% of their truss tomatoes, so on-vine tomatoes. It works by having solar trackers. So all these are heliostat mirrors that focus the sun's energy at the top of this salt tower. The salt tower contains molten salt, 600 degrees, that drives a steam turbine that powers the whole of the system. And the steam turbine is given steam to desalinate the water, and then there's a brine pool. So the whole thing's there working. Just so you get an idea of scale, if you go into Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Tesco, they actually print on the label where the tomatoes come from. You'll often see Thanet earth, okay? So Thanet earth is in Thanet, south of England. This is Thanet earth. So these are greenhouses, ponds, greenhouses. That's Hillsborough Stadium to scale, okay? Absolutely enormous tomato factory. So just as we started recruiting the PhD student to essentially cannibalize the business of mineral wool for growing in. Helen Story said to me, I've been asked to go back to Za'atari, where the tent came from. And I've told them I won't come on my own because I'm a dress designer and I want to bring my pet scientist with me. Okay, so that's me. So off we go. So the dress has got us out to Za'atari in 2016. Za'atari. So this is a map from 2016, 80,000 people, 6 square kilometers, 3,500 births a year. There are children living there today who are 5 and 6 years old, who've never lived anywhere else. It's in the desert. And it's run by the Jordanian government and the UNHCR. And you can see that it's not only is it a refuge, but it's also a prison. So it's surrounded by walls and barbed wire. And these little things down here are armored cars. And there's a great big trench all the way around the outside. The first time I went, the university's admin were apoplectic about me being 12 kilometers from an active war zone. I had a special satellite phone in case we got kidnapped, and like SAS rescue insurance. It was absolutely bonkers. And I didn't tell my missus quite where the camp was, which was the biggest insurance of all. So people don't live in tents anymore. They live in these little things called caravans. It's organized around a series of villages. There's a big street down here that I'll tell you about in a short while. And here you can see Za'atari in relation to the capital of Jordan, Amman, and Dara, which is the region where most of the inhabitants come from. And Dara is part of the Fertile Crescent and was the agricultural heartland of Syria, where everything would grow and everyone had green hands. And then they come over the border because of the civil war, and they're here. They've left everything behind and kind of taken what they could walk out with. At the time, they got 35 litres of water per person per day delivered into one of these tanks once a week. Things would grow if there was water, but you know the land around is really, really scrubby. And people try and grow things because they are Syrian farmers. They love the color green. It's really important to them. And but you can see it's a prison with barbed wire, but it's also a home that's covered in murals. And it's an amazing place to visit. So its status is it's temporary, officially, but the 1967 refugee camp in Amman from the war in 1967 is now a suburb of Amman. It's not temporary at all. It's actually the 3rd biggest conurbation in Jordan, and essentially will become a city in its own right in time. The refugees, they want to go home. They want to be in Syria, right? They want to be where their families are, where their land is, where their culture is. They're illegal immigrants. They can't work. And whilst the Jordanians are the most generous and giving nation I've ever visited, they also want them to go home because they're their brothers and they want to be in their home. And they're driving rent up, they're driving food prices up, and they're driving wages down because the population's increased by 25%. So the police, the landlords in Jordan are, if you make something permanent, you own the land. So the police won't allow anything that looks permanent. And you can't plant things in the ground. And they're really suffering with COVID now. I was supposed to fly to Jordan on Friday, and the UN have just closed the camps to all visitors because there's a big Omicron surge in Jordan at the moment. And they've started with vaccinations, but only 25% of Jordanians have been double vaccinated, and less than 15% of refugees in camps have been double vaccinated. So this is the street, right? The big street down the middle. Sense of humor. It's called the Champs-Élysées. Everyone calls it the Champs-Élysées because it's covered in shops, and you can get everything there. right? And the expression necessity is the mother of invention applies in a refugee camp more than anywhere else in the world because there is nothing. Okay, the official cash income into the camp is 50 US cents per person per week. Okay, so everything grey economy. So I've been in the bread shop, but I've never managed to slip my handler long enough to get a haircut because you're not allowed to wander around on your own. And then the first time, word had got out there was this fat professor with a bag of sweets. And so I got followed all over by these two little girls who emptied my bag of sweets. And the camp's just full of beautiful people with smiles on their faces who are pleased to see you. So I'm there and I was asked to go do something specific about female sanitary health and making sanitary towels, because we had some experience of working in that area and they're very expensive and were kind of hard to source at a decent price. When I got there, that problem had been solved, which is often the case. You go to do one thing, you end up doing something else. And all I could see were people who loved green, who wanted green. And I was talking to them about, well, there's 80,000 fertilizer factories living here. Can't you make your own fertilizer? And that's culturally an absolute, complete nutter no-no. Okay. But I got taken to see this lady by Abdul Kader, who was known as the Green Hand Lady. Yeah. So she tried her best to make the land work. So this is the kind of one of those iconic Land Cruiser UN vehicles. Okay. And I spotted this. So this green screen is what's used in horticulture as a shade. Okay. So I knew that inside there was something interesting. Anyway, a kid came out, bribed the kid with some sweets, and I'm in. Okay. And inside, under that screen was this garden. Okay. And this is the gardener. Okay. And what he'd done was he was so desperate to grow things that he kept pigeons, because the pigeons provided the fertilizer. And then the desert soil wouldn't grow anything because it was so salty. So he washed all the soil out of its salt by using water, allowing the soil to dry, and then scraping the crystallized salt off the top until eventually he got something. So all this stuff's in pots. And then the UN people took me to this warehouse and said, "Oh, we've no idea what to do with these." And it was a warehouse full of polyurethane foam mattresses. And I just started a PhD student on making synthetic soil from polyurethane foam. So I sent home the most excited WhatsApp message ever. Okay, I know what we're going to do. In fact, I was so excited, we had to recreate me getting one down on the second visit because we didn't take a photograph on the first one. So full disclosure. So Harry Wright started in 2016 and his thesis defense was 11th of December 2020. I'll just tell you a bit about his PhD, but nothing too technical. So here's the inside of a polyurethane foam. So there are these struts. The cells are about 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter in size. That means that there's some capillary force to pull water into them. The internal structure of the material is phase separated polyurethane that I did my PhD on. So I've been in this game for quite some time. And they're really versatile. Okay. So you can mix different components, the polyol, the diisocyanate, the water, and the surfactants and catalysts, and change the density. So how much polymer there is compared to the air. So you can change the cell size. You can change the water holding capacity by changing the chemical structures and by changing the cell size. And then if you add particles, then you can use those particles to buffer salts and ions and nutrients and things. So we can do all of those things. So this is his PhD on 3 slides. Okay. So basically, we did a design of experiments, and so we have a polynomial model, and we can predict the properties of the foam from the ingredients. When we started doing design of experiments, I didn't believe that we could do that. I thought the formulations were just too variable. It was too much like biology to be predictable. Okay, but it turns out we could. And we can change, look how much we can change the properties of the foam. So this water absorption test, how quickly the water runs in on that foam and just sits on the top on that one, just by tweaking the ingredients. And yeah, I mean, there's various, you can change all sorts of things and predict the behavior. Oh, I've bust that GIF now, haven't I? Yeah. So you could see the plants growing. So we do plant growth trials. You never grow them to fruit if you're doing a trial because it takes too long. So Harry took a tomato plant home. He started it in that plug. He repotted it in that piece of foam, and then repotted it in that piece of foam, and it ended up filling his window. So then the quickest thing to grow in a grow trial is spring onions. Okay, so we grow a lot of spring onions. So here's his spring onion growth trial. So he's measuring the nitrogen phosphorus content. just again, we have a mathematical model that predicts the properties. And this mathematical model predicts the growing properties from the characteristics of the foam. And the previous model predicted the characteristics of the foam from the ingredients you put into the foam. So we go from ingredients to make foam to spring onions. Amazing. To me, amazing. Okay. So back to Za'atari. So I've collected my piece of foam. It wasn't optimized for plant growth. So we had to learn how to grow tomatoes in it. So here's a tomato plant that the greenhouse technicians germinated, and you can see the roots coming out. It's the same piece of foam. It's got Za'atari written on it. We grew them to fruit because the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that whatever we grew was safe to eat. So there's all sorts of horrible things in polyurethane foam, and we wanted to make sure none of those were in the tomatoes. So tin catalysts, brominated fire retardants. So I collected the fruit, collected the leaves, collected the stems. You can see how well the roots do once they get out of the foam and into the nutrient solution. Bought fruit on the vine with leaves from various places, Waitrose, because it's close. Yeah, Tesco, Beanies, right, which is the whole food shop just next to the uni. The highest heavy metal content, Beanies, the organic material. Okay, but that's another story. So now we know we can do it safe. Out we go to Za'atari again. And the first thing we got going was cutting pieces of foam out and putting seedlings in yogurt pots. Second time we went, they'd already built this. No prompting, right? No word whatsoever. Someone had searched online, found a design. So these are, this is recycled large tent pole, recycled drain pipe, bits of polyurethane foam, smaller tent poles, bit of UNHCR tent on the top, and they're away. We're at the races. Just amazing. So this is called thin film hydroponics. So you have a reservoir of nutrient solution up here. It drains down and runs along the drain pipe so that the roots of the plant are not saturated, so they stay healthy and oxygenated. And then it collects down the bottom. And then every day you pump it back up to the top. Initially, we were doing that with hand pumps. Now we use aquarium pumps just to kind of keep the upper tank with sufficient head. So at this point, all of this has been funded from a pot of money I had stashed away somewhere that you're not supposed to have stashed away anywhere because universities don't work like that anymore. And it was going great. Then GCRF came along. The university had a chunk of money to use on impact. So we accessed that. And things were going okay. And then this guy came along. So this is Moed Al-Mesalmani. Okay, so I was introduced to him by Alistair Goldman, because one of his colleagues in molecular biology had found this Syrian refugee who'd been brought to their attention by the Committee for Academics at Risk. And if the university could pay half his salary, they'd pay the other half. So at the time, I was Pro Vice Chancellor of the Faculty of Science, which had a massive deficit. So half a person's salary was just noise. So we did it. Okay. So he joins us. He is as stern as that photo looks, right? And his attention to detail is phenomenal. And he was a researcher in the Syrian Agricultural Research Institute and ran their plant breeding operation. And he got out via Jordan, then to Turkey, then ended up in Sheffield. We'd kind of got it going, but people didn't really believe us. But once one Syrian farmer, because his home was surrounded by the kind of family farm, once one Syrian farmer had convinced another Syrian farmer that this little fat professor wasn't off his rocker and this was for real, that it really took off. Okay, so I'm not going to, I can't even say this because I only know him as Abu Wissam. Okay, and one of the beautiful things about working in this way is Abu Wissam and I have very little language in common, but this. Okay, and I get loads of these. And I found out that all of a sudden I'm saying, but he's called Abu as well. And he's called Abu as well. And in Arabic culture, Abu means father of, and you get the name of your firstborn, right? So he's father of Wissam. And he was introduced to me as the Green Hand Man. So yeah, so everyone's giving it the thumbs up. One of the other projects we did was we built trailers to take handicapped kids to school, kind of on the backs of bikes, but that didn't quite work. So they repurposed one of those to build a hydroponics training center that was portable and they could take it around the camps. So we've trained more than 1,000 people in hydroponics. This is home base. So this is where the UN workers live. So every visitor that comes into the refugee camp now gets taken in here. And here is Abu Marwan, Abu Mohammed, and Maya doing the training. All the training's done in Arabic by Arabic speakers, kind of as a peer-to-peer. And so if you do the training, you get given a starter set. So you get a Tupperware box, you get some seedlings, you get some foam, you get some nutrient solution. And then you come back and depending on how, if you're doing well, you get more and more supplies. And then eventually people are off on their own, doing their own thing. Yeah, so thumbs up pictures, cabbages, broad beans. I really discovered what co-creation means. Okay, so, I get loads of pictures showing me how healthy the plants are. Okay, that's fine. I don't know one end of a plant from another. But that excited all my horticulture colleagues. This got me excited. This is proper co-creation, right? So repurposed mattress, mint plant, okay? Rather than having to kind of lift it up and stir the solution round, this person had repurposed the pump from a soap dispenser. So when he picked a mint leaf to make his tea, he pumped the solution round. Bingo. Imagine what you could sell those for in Waitrose, right? Absolutely fantastic. And then the kind of just before lockdown, I was on my way over and I got a time to harvest the lettuce message. So this is Moda, who's the green hand woman. Maya, who's a University of Sheffield employee based in Jordan, who works on this project, and Abu Wissam. And they harvest the lettuce and take it to Ali's falafel shop. Okay, and Ali some tomatoes. So Hani is our kind of link man in the UNHCR. So they take the tomatoes round, and I go to Ali's, and they've got the best falafel wrap I've ever had in my life waiting for me. Absolutely brilliant. So everything's done by WhatsApp, okay? Because it's secure. Photos work backwards and forwards. All the technical inputs done by WhatsApp. So that's where all these pictures come from. So they grew chilies, and because they know I like plastics repurposed, they pickled and bottled them in water bottles. I tried to get one of these back through customs. It took me a little bit of a while to get out of customs. But you know, everything's going great. And then November before lockdown, okay? I've told this story enough times that the BBC have got a hold of it, and Victoria Gill, who's a science correspondent, comes out with me to make a film. So there I am with my mate Abu Wissam, and he lets me ride his bike when we come to camp, and we went to have lunch together with the salad being provided by the hydroponics project. And he's always got something new to show me. So there's kind of some flotation ways of growing things where you actually poke the plants through polystyrene foam so that the plant's kept above the water and the roots sit in the foam, sit in the solution. But this time I got something extra. So I had him in this box of Abu Wissam, happy at work. It was his 59th birthday. Excuse me. It was his 59th birthday last week. He lives in this metal box. He's got a wife and 2 daughters, as I have, with the same age. His daughters are the same age as my daughters, and they have no future. I don't normally get quite this bad. Anyway, generous beyond means, okay? So then lockdown happens. What are we doing in lockdown? So all the training went online, in camp online, okay? And loads of innovations during lockdown. So vertical, okay? So there's an aquarium pump down here, and it comes in at the top. At the nursery, we'd built a hydroponic system on the side of a nursery, and they grew strawberries in it. So at playtime, the kids could come out and pick their own strawberries off the side of the nursery. And then during lockdown, loads of home development. So this is actually outside someone's caravan, okay? So this can produce 3 heads of lettuce a week. And because they're all coming at the same time, they're shared out amongst the community, okay? So this fella, Abu Marwan's growing for the community. We're about to go commercial. So we've been looking at developing technologies where people can sell into the market. So these are known as Dutch buckets. So again, it's great for tomatoes, courgettes, aubergines. To celebrate Eid Mubarak, they sent me a photo of a big tomato harvest. You know, all sorts of different colors, great plants. the universal language again. And then I went back in November. So the Moed is an absolute tartar. Okay. Tony's coming over. There'll be pictures taken. Make sure you're wearing your Grantham Centre t-shirts. Okay. So this photo is because we're both killing ourselves laughing because Moed had insisted we wore our Grantham Centre t-shirts and I wore mine as well. Okay. So yeah, so the three Abus and Maya, because now things have really taken off, and we used to buy seeds and seedlings, but we don't anymore. So we now have an in-camp nursery where they do seed selection, okay, for things that grow best in this arid environment. And for hydroponics, normally the plants you'd use would be massively intolerant to disease because they don't see any pathogens, okay? So now we're breeding pathogen-tolerant plants for hydroponics, and we're doing hydroponics in an absolutely microbiologically filthy environment, not a clean one. And all of that is coming home. And we have a £2 million BBSRC grant on suppression of bacterial disease in hydroponics, based on the things we'd learned in Za'atari. Not entirely, but to some significant part. So cash crops, right? You need to, if you're going to generate a livelihood, you need to generate cash. So this is our first attempt our first attempt, Abu Wissam's first attempt to grow saffron hydroponically. Because if you can grow saffron, you can make money, okay? And then this is his nursery and kind of R&D center. So little innovations like in these flotation troughs, the nutrient solution is often deoxygenated, and then that causes root rot. So there's a paddle to oxygenate, and there's, you know, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs of little innovations that come through by WhatsApp. So again, the great people. So Hani said, "Do you want to go see one of the home hydroponic systems that we've been sending you the photos of?" So I was delighted to. What I didn't realize was I was going to Abu Marwan's home, and this is Marwan. So that was an absolute killer, right? And what I can't do, what you're absolutely not allowed to do, is empty your pockets, because I just wanted to stuff every penny I had. Anyway, Abu Marwan is there. It's you know, it's you being here that's making me weep, because I know you're even softer than me. Okay. So, and the other thing was, we saw her again 6 years later. Okay. Couldn't remember us. And because, you know, she was a tiny little girl at the time, and I couldn't find her photo on my phone quick enough. And Helen couldn't find her photo on the phone either, but in the same place in the camp, which was amazing, and still smiling despite all that adversity. But what really told me, what really told me that this was part of people's lives and a really valued part of their lives, is that it's now on the murals. So what they're painting about is the solar farm that provides them with free energy, and the hydroponics that gives fresh fruit and veg. But most importantly, the hydroponics gives a purpose and joy and a connection to culture. So you can teach your kids how to grow things, something that wasn't otherwise possible. And that's really kind of the well-being aspects, and the social aspects are as important as the one tiny little bit of science and technology, which was the physical properties of polyurethane foam are quite similar to soil. That was the only thing we put in, right? Everything else was co-created. And the backwards and forwards has had profound benefits for our research. So we started off with really high-tech foam, and we were heading, and we still are heading towards robotic farming on brownfield sites in big cities. But at the same time, got introduced to a low-tech repurpose recycling technology that meant that the high-tech could benefit from the necessary microbial diversity in the low-tech. And that's really feeding back in now. So we're now starting to put disease-suppressive microbes inoculated into foam, and mycorrhiza, which are the things that trade nutrients with plants for sugar in soil and massively increase yields. So putting all soils function back. So it came home to Sheffield and then has gone back out again. So all that's kind of gone on during COVID. So Harry Wright was the PhD student who kind of kicked it all off. Moed El Masalmani, Jake Nichols, Anastasia Katara. Well, Moed's driven the Desert Garden project enormously. Jake and Anastasia have worked on the soil aspects and also on commercializing hydroponic systems. Helen Story and Dunk Cameron were kind of there all the way, but the Greenbeds people, Maya, Alani, Omar, Abu Wissam, Abu Rahman, Abu Mohammed, and Om Modar were phenomenally important. Without them, none of this would have happened at all, especially when we were remote. And then along the way, all these various organizations have funded us. So back in March, back in March 2020, I got a phone call from Irene Amondi, who was the kind of camp commandant, who said, "We have no PPE. All this is kicking off. We have no PPE. Can you help us?" So with 2 months later, they had a mask house working, because the UN's quite patrician in the way that it does training. So they often train women to sew. So there's always loads of sewing machines around. So we made a factory making masks, making face masks. We've built a Raspberry Pi face mask tester that costs 300 quid to test the efficacy of various fabrics. So we can collect offcuts, work out which are the right fabrics to use. And the masks are now, the whole of the site can be provided with masks from the mask house. And then on the back, and that was the first output of a UKRI Newton Fund grant. They were called Agile Response Grants. I don't know how widely this is going out, but absolutely nightmare. And the least agile grant I've ever had. Mainly because of this, right? There's just too many organizations with their own cultures and their own reasons to raise funds and their silos to allow people to work together. And the hydroponics succeeded because we flew under the radar and lived hand to mouth on the project. And as soon as there was a decent chunk of money involved, everyone else got interested and slowed things down. So the Grantham Centre, which all this comes from, was set up to train sustainability leaders. And we have kind of two missions. One is to do the research to make sure that there's enough for everyone. And the other is to do the research to try and drive a reduction in global resource consumption. So we train PhD students, but we do systemic and interdisciplinary research on intractable problems, and then kind of try and get out and influence and ensure change. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me and coping with me breaking up every now and again, for which I sincerely apologize.